Welcome to part 3 of JavaScripting in Google Earth Engine. So in part 2, we did some very basic scripting to center the map and also create points. We also did a little bit with zooming, but we didn't go much further than that. Now, as we get deeper into this, there are other tools that we will utilize to analyze and inspect certain parts of our map. But before we do that, we need to understand how to bring in information from the Earth Engine data catalog. So if you go to the Earth Engine data catalog, and this is current as of today, there's quite a bit of information in here, and quite a bit is probably the biggest understatement I could make. We're talking about petabytes of data within here that you can pull into the map. Some of this data is in vector format, and some of it is in raster format. So let's make a distinguishment between those two things. So a vector is going to be things like individual points. It could also be lines. It could also be areas which we call polygons. Now there are other vector data out there that we use in the GIS world, but those are going to be the easiest way for you to understand what a vector is. Okay, so a raster is going to be a little bit different than a vector. It still contains geographic position, so a latitude and a longitude, but may contain or will contain other types of information. You have to think of a raster kind of like a picture that's made up of pixels. So a pixel has an orientation, has a location within a picture, and that pixel contains data. If we consider a picture that we would take with a camera on our phone, right? Each pixel contains data that is in the red, the green, and the blue, which will give us the color that our eyes see. And that is recorded within that particular pixel. Now, that is raster data, but raster data can also include things that our eyes cannot see, such as the near infrared and the shortwave infrared. So imagery of the Earth falls within raster data. In this part, we will not deal with raster data. That will be a subject for an upcoming section. But we will begin with vector data because it's a little bit easier to call that into our map. Okay, and there is loads of stuff on here, and I'm going to refer back to the last script that we wrote, which, if you remember right, is in Austria. So it might be nice just to have some boundaries. So let's just say we need to find some political boundaries. Now, I've got the search bar off of the screen here, but I'm just going to type in country boundaries, and you can probably see that as I go into the search. And I click on that, and I'm looking for something that's going to show me the boundary. So I'm going to use this LSIB 2017. So if I click on that, you can see this contains political boundaries as polygons, right? So we know we're looking at vector data. And we know that if we want to use this feature, we have to use this function. Okay? So I'm just going to copy that. Okay? Just to make my life a little bit easier so I don't have to type that out. Now, if I go down here and scroll down a little bit, you can see there's actually some code which I could copy and paste right in, or even run directly into the code editor and see what it does. You can certainly use that, and don't be afraid to use that. Now, I'm not looking for just general usage here. I have something specific in mind. So I've just copied this. I'm going to go back into my script editor, okay, and let's write some script to do something, okay? So I know that I've got a collection here that I can use, this large-scale international boundary polygons. I know it contains information about each country, if I go into the table schema, you can see it contains a country abbreviation, a FIPS country code, a US recognized country name, and also the continental region. You may want to use any one of these. So what we want to be able to do is pull things out. Okay, we want to be able to see things. Now, I could just as easy, let's display all of the countries. Okay, let's just start with that. So I'm going to create a variable, okay, and I'm going to call this all underscore countries. And I'm going to set that equal to that thing I copied. So I'm going to hit Control V, and here you can see all countries is going to point to the Earth Engine feature collection, which goes right to the data catalog, and pull out that LSIB Simple 2017. Okay, so just to make sure, I'm going to put a semicolon on the end. I'm going to run this to make sure I don't have any errors in my syntax. Great. Did it display anything? It did not. What didn't you do? You didn't tell it that you want to display it. You created the layer all countries, but you didn't actually tell it to display it. So if you remember from part 2, we used the map add layer. Okay, and in parentheses, I do all countries. Oops, and put a semicolon on the end. Now when I run, this may take a second to load because it contains all of the countries of the world. You can see I now have political boundaries. I can zoom around. If I choose to do so, I can go to the inspector here. I can click on some portion of the map, and it tells me, hey, there's one element here that you clicked on, and it's a feature, and it contains 4 properties. Okay, and I'm just keep hitting these drop downs. I don't need the geometry, but let's look at the properties of the object. You can see the abbreviation is Canada. The country, or CAN, the country CO. Remember, that's the, it's not the abbreviation. What is CO? That is the FIPS code. And the country name is Canada, and the world region is North America. Okay, so all you've done is you've created a variable all countries that points to that feature collection, and you bring it all in as a layer. I'm going to click back over to console to clear that, and here you can toggle that layer on and off. There's also a slider here which allows you to increase the transparency of that layer. Now, let's say we want to do something a little bit different. Let's say we want to actually filter this to pull out one country. We don't want to waste resources on Earth Engine showing things we don't need. Okay, so now that we understand we don't want to show everything, let's build a filter into this. So I'm going to, might as well just leave these in here, no sense in recreating the wheel. But if you recall back to our part 2, I give you points somewhere in Austria. So why don't we create just the boundary for Austria? And again, you can name it whatever you want as a variable, but it does make sense to call it what it's going to be. And I'm going to continue to use this EE feature collection function and call that out of the data catalog. Okay, but I'm going to get rid of that semicolon because I needed to keep doing some things. Now, because I've removed that semicolon, I can actually continue this on the next line. The computer will continue to go down and look for the next iteration as long as that semicolon's not there. I'm also going to add a tab just to give me some nice organization to my script. And I'm going to put in a dot filter. Now at this point there are things you can do and you can do differently. There's more than one way to filter this. I've tried to think of the least confusing way to do it. I'm not sure there is a least confusing way, but this is the way I'm going to recommend you do it. Okay? We can just use filter, but it's a lot better if we say, hey, now I want you to use a filter, but I want you to use a specific filter. It's like saying, you need a screwdriver, right? But you don't specify whether or not you're using a flathead or a Phillips or a Torx bit or something like that. So here I'm going to say use a filter, and the filter you want to use is the Earth Engine dot filter, where we're doing a dot EQ for equals. So we're going to use the Earth Engine filter for equals, okay? And yeah, I know that might be confusing. Don't be worried. All we're saying is you need to filter something. You're going to use this Earth Engine filter, okay, that we're looking for something that's equivalent. So I've got to open up another set of parentheses here, okay, because the filter, this filter is looking for parentheses, and then the specific filter is looking for yet another set. So if you go back to the schema, I want the country NA, the country name. And the best thing to do is to just scroll over to where we want to be. And I'm going to use the inspector, click on Austria, and I'm going to go down into feature itself, look at the properties, and look how it is written. It's written just as we would expect it with a capital A. Again, it is case sensitive. So here I want the country NA, okay, but because country NA is a string, right? It's text, it's not a number, it's not a variable. We have to give it single quotes, okay? So once I typed in one single quote, it put an ending one in. That's very convenient. And I'm going to type in country underscore NA. So I'm just matching the category I want to filter by, okay, and then I'm just going to use my arrow key on my keyboard, and I'm going to do comma, right, because this filter looks for something equal to something. I want the country NA to be equal to something, so I'm going to use a quote, single quote again, and type in Austria as it is written in my inspector, okay. So now, and you can see that's got an ending quote on it as well. And I'm going to put a semicolon there to let the computer know, okay, that's it. I'm done. I've got everything I need here. And I might as well, I need to change this because all countries no longer exist. In fact, if I try to run this, go to my console here, I get an error. All countries is not defined. You see, we changed that to Austria. So I need to change all countries to Austria and add that in. And you see Austria's small case just like my variable. Now I'm going to hit run. And lo and behold, there we have the outline of the country of Austria. And we have a layer here that we can turn on and off and adjust the transparency just like we did before. Okay, so hopefully you see how that makes sense. If you break this down into its pieces, it's not particularly difficult, though it looks very foreign. Okay, and that is the basics of how you retrieve vector data from the data catalog, and how you can also filter it, and how you display it. Hopefully you found that helpful.